afternoon. We are live. I'm Andy Andrews. You joined us for the Blue Plate Special. We're broadcasting here from the Financial District in Orange Beach, Alabama. The Financial District where all our skyscrapers are. So we're here on the second floor of the tallest building in town. Shanda Danner, good to see you. Dina Kilpatrick, hey, thank you for sharing. And Shanda, are you in Dothan? Say hey to Bob Woodall for me. Man, it's a pretty day here. Martin Simmons checking on the Navarre Pier. Thank you. Navarre Pier, where people used to stand on the rails and cast to the ling. Used to just drive me crazy. I used to think you guys are absolute idiots. But, you know, they just wanted fish more than I did, I suppose. Charlie Marlowe, hey, good early afternoon from the Pentagon. All you guys there crammed into what I'm imagining is a medium-sized office, eating lunch, watching the Blue Plate Special, hoping not to have anybody griping about you, I would imagine. Anyway, we're glad you guys are here. Appreciate all you do there at the Pentagon. And, man, I don't know if I look kind of scraggly and unshaven today, but if I do, it's only because I'm kind of scraggly and unshaven. After church Sunday, Dan Stone and Adam and I went up to the hunting camp, and we're fishing and driving around, and we didn't do much, but we had a good time. Solved a lot of problems. And I realized that I didn't take my razor up there. We just rolled in here a little while ago. So just ignore this part of my face, which you probably ignore most parts of my face anyway. Today we're going to do this day in history. We haven't done this in a while. Every now and then we pick a day. Dana Kilpatrick says it's No Shave November. Not for me. You know, I have never really been tempted to grow a mustache or a beard. And it's really because 13 whiskers won't do that. You know, I don't have many whiskers. My boys are the same way. Adam would dearly like to grow a beard. And he showed me one time, he showed his long whisker. He said, grow the beard. Anyway, we had a good time. But today, November 4, now November, this is funny to me, but in doing my research for this day, November is named after the Latin word novem, which means 9, even though November is the 11th month of the year and it has 30 days. But it's named after 9. November's birthstone is the topaz. Isn't that kind of a cheap stone? It is, yeah. I mean, what is somebody's birthstone a diamond? You? I can't hear.
That's me, April.
You're April? You're
Yep.
a diamond? Well, you
Diamond.
were a very expensive birthstone.
Very expensive, yes.
That's why you were cheap on your Christmas gifts. Matt's the only person that I know that was just, what a joy to your parents I was asking my parents for rocking robots and electric football and a mini bike and stuff like that. And what did you ask for?
Construction paper and tape.
That's my kind of kid.
I got about 10 rolls of tape and I don't know how many reams of construction paper, but you better believe that paper was getting taped.
I bet your parents were like, spend $20 on him. Go ahead. Let's just break the bank on the construction paper. The birth flower is the chrysanthemum. Now, which one is the chrysanthemum? Isn't that the funeral flower? Don't people use that at funerals? Isn't that kind of a cheap flower people give for funerals? And that's the birth flower. The birth flower is November. It's the death flower the rest of the time. Also, this is the month that the full moon is called the beaver moon. Some Native American thing, I'm sure. Do you know Adam's girlfriend is Native American, half Native American, and her last name is Beaver. So we say, this is your moon, Emily. This is your moon. And of course, when we want her to do something, we say, leave it to Beaver. Okay, so there are a lot of historical events that happened in November, like the end of World War I. And yet, if we focus in on November 4th, there are some pretty interesting things. The first interesting thing that I found, the first jaw-dropping thing, I suppose, was in 1646, when Massachusetts convicted somebody of denying that the Holy Bible is God's Word. And you know what the penalty was? Death. It was the death penalty. Whew. Wow. That won't even get you a 3-star review on Google now. But good grief. I mean, anybody say whatever they want. In 1740, I thought this was a good follow-up. In 1740, the hymn writer Augustus Montague Toplady was born. Now, this is the guy who wrote Rock of Ages. Probably aware he'd be executed if he'd written a pop song or something. But Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Now, I was just showing you I knew that song. This one is very interesting. In 1819, Maori chiefs Hongihika and Rewa, they were Maori chiefs in New Zealand, and they sell, who did they sell this to? Roll down just a little bit. Yeah, that's right. The church. They sold it to the church. They sold land to the Church Missionary Society in New Zealand. And they sold 13,000 acres for 48 axe heads. Yeah, you can rip off the natives, but don't say anything bad about the Bible. 48 or 47 axe heads, I can't remember, but it's 40-something axe heads, 48 axe heads for 13,000 acres. I haven't done the math on how much an acre that is, but I wish I could get that kind of price on land today. I'd go to Ace Hardware right after work. In 1841, the very first wagon train arrived in California. They went from Missouri, very first wagon train. Know how long it took them? 5.5 months. 5.5 months from Missouri to California in a wagon train. You know, when you think about going across the mountains, and if you're in the studio today, look in this cabinet at the bottom, and it'll look like something like a carved stone. Okay? Well, the wagon trains, you know, when the first wagon train went over, it had scouts and guides that kind of barely knew the way. And so they took them over, then they come back. Hey, Andrew Murata. Got a lot of Murata here on this thing. But the the scouts came back to Springfield and were going to take another wagon train. And so they're having the meeting before the trip. Judy Hess, have you seen the Martins? Have you guys seen the Martins? You know, the Martins on YouTube, or with the Gaithers. Judy Martin, that's who's with us right now. Look up the Martins. They're unbelievable. Let's see. So what was I saying? Okay, so they're going from going back to give the trip talk to the new people. And they're telling you, you don't take this, make sure you take that. And one of the things they said was, they said, we are going to cross an area that for about 6 weeks, there's not a single tree to tie your animals to graze your animals. So we need a way to graze the animals. And so that thing, that I'll ask people, I say, what do you think that is? And people say, an anchor? I don't know, a lift? But it's about that big. It's made of stone, and it created a new industry. The stonemasons and the blacksmiths got together and created a metal loop in that stone so that one hung from each back corner of the Conestoga wagon, and when they stopped for the evening, they could put their animals out with those things and graze them. And so when they got to the mountains, now they had already told them, do not be taking your mother's chest of drawers, okay? Because you're not going to be able to get over the mountain and you're just going to have to dump it. But people did anyway. And why did people do it? Because their wives made them do it. That's exactly why they did it. Because the wife said, my mother brought that over and I'm not leaving there. So, okay. And so then they get to the edge of the mountains, and the husband says, it looks like we're going to have to dump the chest. You're not dumping my chest of drawers. That's my mother's chest of drawers. You dump me if you know. And they go, And then the wagon train scout comes and says, ma'am, you're going to have to do that or we're going to leave you here. So she says, all right. But before they dumped Mama's chest of drawers, they said, do we need these things anymore? These weights? And they said, no, we're not going to need them anymore. So there were 4 major passes across the mountains that were used, the Oregon Trail, Santa Fe Trail, California. And so 4 major passes. And so in the early 1900s, hikers found piles of these things. And nobody really knew what they were until somebody did the research and found out. And because they pretty much dumped them all in the same place. So, but Mama's chest of drawers had already rotted to nothing, I'm sure. Oh, Janice Queen from North Carolina. Love the Blue Plate Special. Thank you. I'm glad you're with us. In 1842, was I speaking of crazy wives? I don't think I was speaking of crazy wives. It's not crazy to want your mama's chest of drawers. I got 2 guys here just being real still. a lot of ladies in here, 2 guys just being real still. Right? Like, don't look at me. I didn't say anything. But if we had been speaking about crazy wives, on November 4th in 1842, Abraham Lincoln married Mary Todd. Now, I think if you do any reading about Mary Todd Lincoln, you'll find that there was a reason Abraham Lincoln seemed sad all the time. You know, it's like, oh my God, what have I done? So, 1879, Will Rogers was born in Oklahoma in 1879. And that gave birth, when he was born, it also gave birth to one of the greatest modern put downs that you could give anybody. You look at somebody and go, Will Rogers never met you, did he? Do you get it, or are you too young to get that? You don't get it? Will Rogers said, I never met a man I didn't like. And so to say to somebody, Will Rogers never met you, did he? It's a great little undercover dig that most people won't even get. In 1922, a little over 100 years ago, Howard Carter discovered the intact tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt. King Tut's tomb, which evidently came with a curse. Because curiously, and now we can look back, and after, when was it, 1922? After 103 years, every single person who went in that tomb with Howard Carter that day is dead. They said it was cursed. Could be. Okay. In 1937, this is an odd one because that seems like a long time ago, but Loretta Swit was born. Hot Lips on MASH. Margaret Houlihan. And I guess I have a hard time thinking 1937. I mean, she just died this past year. She was 88. 88. And we still, Polly and I still watch MASH. It comes on MeTV from either 5 to 6 or 6 to 7. I can't remember. But 2 times a night. And we'll watch MASH while we're like making dinner or something. And man, MASH, it's right up there with the Andy Griffith Show. For different reasons, but if you haven't watched MASH in a long time, there's a couple of reasons to watch it. One, it seems to be pretty historically accurate, especially as far as now maybe the politics are not, but the actions and the movements and the people they portray, it's pretty historically accurate. And I think because it's a period piece. I mean, when it came out in the 70s or 80s? 70s, 80s? I don't know. But when it came out, it was already a period piece. It depicted the 1950s. And so now to look at something, okay, it started in 72. September 17th, 1972 is the first air date. And so now, when you look at something in the 50s, it's just you're looking at something in the 50s. It don't matter if you're living in the 70s and 80s or living in 2025. And so it's like captured. It's like if you watch something like Good Times or All in the Family or shows like that. Even Andy Griffith, the Andy Griffith Show seems to stay. That seems to stay at that age. And it doesn't, we don't watch that and think, boy, that's old, even though it's in black and white. But you look at something like The Good Times or Archie Bunker and you go, boy, that hasn't aged well. And so MASH, and I think MASH is probably the best casting I've ever seen on any television show. Every character on that show, even the small characters, were great. And they had some recurring characters, Colonel Flagg, Sidney, the psychologist. They had some recurring characters that were great. I thought it was a great decision. I mean, Klinger was hilarious when he was, dressed up like a woman, but then that kind of ran its course, and then he started dressing in regular Army gear, and you kind of didn't notice because you liked Klinger, and so the whole show. And then when they would lose a character, they wouldn't replace them with somebody who is just like them. They wouldn't try to replace them the same way. You know, when um, um, the first colonel, um, McLean Stevenson, who was he? Who was he? Henry Morgan, wasn't it? No, it was Harry Morgan that played Colonel Potter. I can't believe I can't think of the colonel's
the
name.
first colonel in MASH was
Colonel
Lieutenant
Blake.
Colonel. What?
Henry Blake. Yeah. And so when, you know, and he was just a lunatic and kind of a, you know, free spirit and not Army at all. And then when they switched to Sherman Potter, when Potter came in, the episode that he came in, the narrator, which they were still using at you know, a little bit on there, the narrator, the last line on that episode was, new Commandant Sherman Potter, regular Army, God help us all. And that was the intro to him. And then when Frank Burns, which I thought Frank Burns was just the best / worst, right? I mean, you know, you just wanted to slap the heck out of this guy. Just, you know, but God, he was funny. And even that started wearing a little thin, and when and he knew, evidently, he knew, because he's the one who left the show of his own accord, and so did Radar. But they knew when the time to go would be, and then they brought in Charles Emerson Winchester, David Ogden Stiers, and he was totally the opposite of Frank Burns. He's a brilliant surgeon, smarter than everybody else. I mean, I just thought they did that. So if you haven't watched that lately, there's your commercial to watch it. John Mason Smith, hey buddy. Are you glad? Are you glad? Are you glad that the blue paint hasn't been dropped from YouTube like every single SEC game? Wow, you got a big laugh with that one here. I mean that is just amazing. You know, Dan and I were talking about how broken up the landscape of media is today. That, you know, there's not something that everybody talks about anymore. You know, I mean, and I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll be in the grocery store and I'll see the magazines, you know, there. I don't recognize anybody on them. I mean, I don't even know who's on the cover. I don't even know these people on the cover of magazines. They're famous enough to be on the cover of magazines. I don't even know who they are. But the media is so separated. I mean, who would have thought we would be griping about YouTube screwing up SEC football? It just seems bizarre to me. But I remember years ago, some of you may remember when I was on the Nashville Network, and I would be on that show every month, and then sometimes if I was guest hosting for Ralph Emery, I'd be on twice a month, and so it was considered a very minor show as far as television goes. I mean, it was just considered a very, you know, there were a few cable channels out there, and it was considered a very minor show. And every night, 5 nights a week, they had between 4 and 5 million viewers. And that was considered a very minor show. Now, you know, the hottest thing going right now is Joe Rogan's podcast. And it has 4 million viewers, you know, and I mean, we looked at it, 4 million to watch something, and that, and then I also think about the Tonight Show with who's the Tonight Show? Not Jimmy Kimmel. I can't stand him.
Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon, who, I don't watch him, but I don't mind him. And The Tonight Show today has 1.6 million viewers. And here I was on that show that only had 4 million viewers, and we thought, wow. People would say, do you get recognized? Yeah, in Cracker Barrel and Quincy's Steakhouse. That was our audience there. And country music. Country music people watched that show. I mean, the country music singers. And which is how I ended up being friends with so many of them, because I wasn't competing with them. I mean, Waylon Jennings and George Jones, they hated each other's guts, it seemed like to me, but they both liked me. I liked both of them. And to ever tell you about the time at Bull Run Battlefield, it was a July 4th, and it was hot. And so I was being added to some of these bills at these fairs and all because I was on the national network. And so I wasn't an opening act. I was a special guest, which means that you get your name on the ticket. Okay. But in effect, you're still the opening act. You're first, and they pay you like it. And so, but, supposedly I was part of the bill. And so I was at Bull Run Battlefield. It was a July 4th, and they're having this outdoor event, and it was Waylon and George Jones. And it was supposed to kick off like at, 1:30 or 2 o'clock. And it was hot. I mean, there was no shade. And so they had a little camper for me. It was air conditioned. And then, George's bus, Waylon's bus, and crew buses, and all like this. And so I'm not hearing anything at like 1:30 when it's supposed to start. And one of them was supposed to go, and then I'm going, and then the other was going to go. And so 1:30 or 2, whenever it was supposed to start, I'm not hearing anything. And I wait like 15, 20 minutes, stick my head out, and I'm not seeing any action around the stage or anything. And so this guy, his name was George too. Wish I could remember his last name. I'm going to find out. But he was the promoter for a lot of fair shows, a lot of festival shows. And he used to hold a cigar in his mouth all the time. It wouldn't be lit, but he'd hold a cigar in his mouth. He talked like that because he had that cigar. And he was kind of a short, plump guy. And I went and I said, "Hey, George, when's this going to start?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Okay. What, is there something going on?" He said, "Yeah, those guys are fighting. Neither one of them wants to go on first." I'm like, "So what are they doing?" He said, "They're just staying on their bus." Like, seriously? Yeah. So after another 30 minutes, they're bringing ambulances in. They're carting people off the battlefield. It's like, you're just like back to Bull Run, man. Because, people were fainting, passing out there, and they're hauling people off. But George and Waylon still on their bus. And I go on George's bus, and I say, "Hey, George." I say, "Hey, buddy, how you doing? How you doing?" Good. How you doing?" "Well, we're just hanging there. Waylon, he's such a butthole." And I said, "Yeah, he is, And you know how Waylon is?" "Yeah, I do. He's, you hardly deal with him. And so we're just waiting. We're ready to serve the people, to do whatever, but he's just being a butthole." And so, yeah, I know. So I talked to George for a while. Then I go over to Waylon's bus. I walk in. Waylon goes, "Hey, Hoss, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing good, Waylon. How are you?" "I'm good, man. I'm good. Just trying to figure this out today." "What's happening?" "Well, George, what a butthole he is." And I said, yeah, George, what a butthole." And finally, I told him, I said, hey, I'm going on. I told George, the promoter, I said, I got to fly out. So I'm going to go on. And then they can figure it out from there. And I never did find out. I never did even follow up back to find out who went on after me. But God, they were all kind of weird, you know. But not all of them. But I knew all those guys from all the country music people from the 70s and 80s. The only two guys that were stars then, stars now, that I never met George Strait, and I never met Don Williams. And I always wanted to meet Don Williams. So, you know that song, Good Old Boys Like Me? That's just poetry. That's just such a great song. But I always liked him. And, I mean, I didn't have anything one way or another about George Strait. I just never met him. But all the rest of them, I got stories about all of them. How long you want to sit here? I'm telling you. Oh, wow. Are you kidding me? Bill Cody is watching this. What in the world are you doing spending your time watching me? This is Bill Cody from WSM Radio and the Grand Ole Opry. I'm embarrassed that you're watching. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm pretty proud that you're watching. You and Judy Martin, you know, and 10 other people. But Bill Cody, I want to come up and do your show. I sometimes I'll be at the Opryland Hotel. I'll stand outside the booth and watch you guys there. And who was I watching one day? I can't remember. I've watched so many things, but Cody is he's in the Country Music Hall of Fame. I'm kind of blah 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 blah, you know, because you're watching this. Okay, let's stop talking about singers. Let's quit talking about anybody who can sing. On November 4th, 1961, Bob Dylan was born. Since we're not talking about anybody who can sing, I'm telling you, if Bob Dylan started today, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. I mean, can you imagine Bob Dylan singing a Randy Travis song? I'm gonna love you forever, forever and ever, amen. I mean, where's that gonna go? Islands in the stream, that is what you are. Something in the orange. I can't figure anything he would be good at. Polly told me I should not be mean on this show. She caught me being mean to somebody the other day. She don't watch the show, but then you guys put it as a funny clip and put it on Instagram, and she saw it and she sent it to me with like a thumbs down. This is mean. You take that off. You need to take that off. And I'm like, I was just kidding. And she's, yeah, but he's got a family too. And I said, you know, Clint Howard, Ron Howard's brother. I said he turned into an ugly adult. He was, I wouldn't mean it to be mean. But he was such a cute little dang kid. You know, he was, Leon on the Andy Griffith Show. And I said he turned into an ugly adult. Polly didn't like that. I didn't mean for it to be a social media post. I didn't even mean to start talking about it now. But if you're going to be mean, Bob Dylan cannot sing. I'm just saying. In 1979, back when people still thought Bob Dylan could sing, in 1979, on this day, November 4th, 500 Iranian students loyal to the Ayatollah Khomeini seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 90 hostages for 440 days. That happened on this date in 79. And do you remember how much that changed the landscape of television? There was a show that ended up being a nightly show, but it aired for 444 days because of the hostage crisis. And I can't remember the newsman. You would recognize him. You'd know him if you saw him. But the newsman that did that show, and it was like day 285, and you do the hostage rescue. By the way, today, our podcast that came out today, The Professional Noticer, was with Rocky Sickman, and Rocky was a U.S. Marine that was in the embassy, and he was held hostage for 444 days. And so he is the guest. So if you want to look up The Professional Noticer with the Iran crisis, America held hostage, you hear my interview with this guy, and it's fascinating to me. But it was Ted Koppel. It was Ted Koppel that did Nightline. And Nightline, which lasted for years and years and years, started because of the Iranian hostage crisis. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States, defeating Jimmy Carter in a landslide. A lot of that had to do with the hostage crisis, I think. That kind of sank Carter's presidency. Well, that and the economy. So I was trying to think, wasn't there something, I think Rocky said this, and I didn't remember this, but when the inauguration happened with Reagan, like, they let the hostages go when Reagan was inaugurated. Just basically thumb their nose at Carter. But I've done work with the special operations. I worked with special ops for 8 years, and over at the ops base, they have this big picture of the special operations group that made the attempt to get those guys. And there's a guy that I still know, and he kind of heads up Special Warrior Foundation to send special ops kids, either kids, guys who have been killed overseas. They send their kids to college. They pay for all the college and everything. And so everybody calls him Coach. And on that picture, and if you look up anything about the hostage rescue thing, which it was a disaster. One helicopter ran into another in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the night. But if you look that up and look at the pictures that they've got there, you'll see one guy's on a motorcycle. That's Coach. Because before the rescue mission, the CIA decommissioned Coach, parachuted him in with a motorcycle into the desert, and he went and set up, not flares, but digital points or something for the helicopters to come in, for them to home in on. And then the CIA picked him back up, recommissioned him, and he went on the mission. But when you see that picture, if you look it up, just Google it, and you'll see Coach There's a bunch of line of them there, and before they went on the mission, and coaches on the motorcycle. In 1981, is this our last one? I think this is our last one. Yep. In 1981, Dr. George Nicopolis. Recognize that name? Dr. Nick. He was acquitted on this day of overprescribing drugs for Elvis Presley. He was acquitted, even though everybody knew he did it. Dr. Nick and O.J. Simpson. Everybody knew they did it. Both of them were acquitted. You know, when I was working as a comedian, I had a friend who wrote a song about Elvis. And the song was called Elvis Was a Narc. That was the name of the song. Now, this is back in the 80s, okay? But let me see if I can remember part of it. Elvis roamed the streets of Memphis after dark. Or Elvis was a narc. He roamed the streets of Memphis after dark. He did it all to keep Memphis drug-free. He believed everyone... Wait a minute. Elvis was a narc. He roamed Memphis after dark. He did it all to keep Memphis drug-free. He believed till he less on the street. Oh my God. Polly hates my Elvis impression. She hates it because Polly, oh my God, Polly and Dan Stone, y'all are big Elvis people. One of my friends and my first wife, Elvis people. I mean, they're just Elvis people. She's my only wife, but she's my first. But Elvis, it just kills me. Polly is like a staunch defender of Elvis. And I always tell her, I said, look, if Elvis was alive today, he'd be Engelbert Humperdinck. That's who he'd be. He would not be some famous rock and roll person, you know. If he was alive today, he'd be doing Krispy Kreme commercials in Las Vegas, you know. And she said, no, he would not. He would not. I'm like, yes, he would. And then I'll do my Elvis impression, and she will come unglued. It's like, Scylla, hey, baby, bring me my pills and my jelly donuts, darling. She hates it, man. She hates, and if I put in there, I'm in here on the toilet, baby, then she will go nuts. I mean, she'll go nuts. I mean, she don't like that at all. I mean, it goes from kind of being funny to if I put the toilet thing in there, oh my God, yeah, she comes unglued. Sheesh, Elvis. You know, we've got on Wisdom Harbor, we've got a dock on Wisdom Harbor, which if you haven't joined wisdomharbor.com, you got to join. You got to join. It's $27 a year, for God's sake, and you got so much stuff. But we have one dock, there's an I Was There dock, where we have first-person accounts of historical things. And we've got an I Was There with the sinking of the Indianapolis, a guy who was in the water with all the sharks and was one of the 300 out of the 900 that survived. We got an I Was There at Auschwitz, where we talked to a lady who was in Auschwitz. We got I Was There escaping Romania, but Rose Schindler was the lady at Auschwitz. We got with the fall of, with escaping Romania with Ceausescu, and We got several I was there's. Okay, but one of the I was there's is I was there with Elvis. And it's TG Shepard. TG Shepard, the singer. It is one of the most fascinating stories about Elvis that I've ever heard in my life. And nobody seems to know it except TG Shepard fans. But we've got this on there, and I was so happy to get this story and have him telling that story on the I Was There platform. But he was from a very, very poor family in central Tennessee. And when he was 14, ran away from home. And so he was on the streets. He went to Memphis, and he was literally on the streets in Memphis. And so, you know, I know what that's like to be in that position. And so I know kind of how you think. And you think, where can I get something to eat that'll take me a long time to eat, that I can eat inside in air conditioning or in heat? And so on Saturdays, it would be like 20 cents for 4 hours of skating in the skating rink. And so he would go in and stay in there till like 10 o'clock. And so when he came out, he was like the last one out. They're having to say, okay, it's time to go. And so he knows he's fixing to go to some highway overpass or, you know, spend the night. And he's 14. And when he's out there just kind of hanging out in the parking lot, just figuring out, do I want to walk that way or want to walk that way, a couple of big Cadillacs come in. And he said, it's about 11 o'clock at night. A couple of big Cadillacs come in, and they pull up in front of the skating rink, and it was right behind him, the window rolls down, and the guy driving the car, it's Elvis. And he said, what's your name? And he said, Bill Browder, which is TG Shepard's real name. And he said, how old are you? He said, 14. He said, can you skate? I said, yes, sir. He said, you like football? I said, I do. He said, well, we had one of our team members drop out, and we've got the skating rink for the night, and we're fixing to go in and play football. You want to play? And he thought, yeah, just to get back in the skating rink. Yeah, I'll go. So he said, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen in my life. We went in and played football on roller skates. And he said, everybody was falling, hitting, crashing. And he said, it was the craziest thing in the world. And he said, about daylight, everybody's tired and everybody's ready to go. And so we all walk outside. And he said, Elvis told him, he said, hey, where you want me to drop you off? I'll drop you off somewhere. He said, no, I'm not. I'm fine. And Elvis said, well, where do you live? Where? And he said, I'm just kind of wandering. And Elvis said, well, where are you staying? And he said, I'm really not staying anywhere. And Elvis said, well, come on and eat breakfast with us. So took him to a restaurant. They all ate breakfast. And then Elvis said, are you sure there's nowhere I can drop you off? No. So he said, well, then come on to the house. And so from 14 till about 23, Bill Browder lived at Graceland. Lived there. And he got a job as a record rep for, I think it was RCA. And it was RCA or Capitol, I can't remember. But Bill Cody, are you still watching this? I know you know this story. You're like, all right, come on. But he was a record rep for RCA, and then did some demos, and then actually cut a record that went to the top of the charts before Elvis found out he was singing. And he was singing under the name TG Shepard. So there's no reason for, but Elvis recognized his voice. And one day he comes in and he said he thought he was in trouble, but he wasn't. And Elvis bought TG Shepard his first bus, gave TG Shepard his first bus. So that makes me like Elvis a little more. Not that I disliked him. If I seem like I dislike him, it's only because of my wife. We'll see you Thursday. Bye-bye.